Welcome to Essential Estate Experts, the estate planning podcast and ultimate resource for understanding estate planning and elder law, brought to you by Screenfire Media. Let's get started.
Hey there, folks. Chuck here. Thanks so much for joining us for Essential Estate Experts. We're going to be breaking down the myths and mysteries and complexities that come with estate planning, wills, trusts, and all the nuances and variances that come from state to state to state. We're going to go from a state of confusion to a state of enlightenment. All that stuff that we don't like to talk about, but we need to. We're so glad you're here, and we look forward to opening this world up further to you. Before we get started, I need to make this quick note. We ask that you please be aware that the information provided on Essential Estate Experts is for entertainment and for informational purposes only. Listening to this podcast does not establish an attorney-client relationship. Always consult with a qualified lawyer before making any decisions related to legal matters. Do not take legal advice from a podcast. All right, now that we got that out of the way, let's start the show. Like I said, I'm Chuck. My background is broadcasting, podcasting, all that fun stuff. And I am so excited to be a part of this project talking about estate plans and trusts with you. I am joined by my co-host, Max Porter. Max, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Chuck. I'm Max Porter. I've worked with a lot of lawyers on estate planning, and I'm really looking forward to getting this information out there. One of the big questions we're going to be talking about is, does the average person, not a Rockefeller, need an essential estate expert? If you're one of the regular folks, can you save a ton of money by skipping the lawyers and using an online service that might be very tempting to create a will and trust for your family?
Well said, Max. And we are not going to be doing it alone. We are going to be joined by our main host of the show. He is going to be our first guest on the show today, just to kind of open things up and get to know him a little better. But for those who don't know, Marc Zasada is a published writer, broadcaster with years of experience working in estate planning and elder law. He's written several books on the topic. He has written dozens, if not hundreds, of articles on estate planning and trusts. So, Marc, thank you so much for joining us today. We are really excited to dive into this project with you.
Thank you so much, Chuck and Max. Let me just lay out this basic problem of, do you need a lawyer? When people are injured in a car accident, or they're going through a divorce, or they're charged in a crime, they understand that they need a lawyer. But somehow when they're making some of the most important decisions in their life, when they're figuring out what will happen after they die, with their goods and support for their loved ones, when they're trying to prevent arguments amongst their loved ones after they die, they think they can do it themselves. And they don't think they need a lawyer, and that somehow they can do something on the back of an envelope as a will, and that somehow it will all work out. And part of the problem is that people just don't want to think about these things. They don't want to think about their own death. Although one of the things I want to talk about today is it's important during your lifetime to do estate planning for yourself as well. And another big piece of the problem are these online trust mills, where you pay a little money and a robot helps you fill out a form. They've made it sound super easy. They've made it sound like, oh, you can do this in half an hour and everything will be okay. Well, it's not true. And that's another thing I want to talk about today.
Fantastic. You know, you mentioned, Marc, that one thing you want to make sure you do during your lifetime is get your estate plan done. So what I'm curious about is, at what age do you think one should start worrying about getting a estate plan done? I mean, as an example, let's say a woman in her early 30s unexpectedly inherits a significant sum of money, say, I don't know, a couple $100,000. And so she's thinking like, well, when do I need to start worrying about this?
She should have started worrying a lot earlier, actually, because I hope you're sitting down. But seriously, people should have an estate plan as soon as they turn 18. I'm not kidding.
Whoa.
When you turn 18, your parents no longer have the legal right to make health or financial decisions for you. So if you're hit by a car and you're laying in the hospital, they don't necessarily have the legal right to say what medical procedures should be done. They don't have the legal right to go in and pay your bills unless you have a document that says they do, and that's called an estate plan. So that woman actually should have done it a lot earlier. Never mind her having a couple $100,000 that she inherited. She also probably has a lot of other legal responsibilities. Her car insurance, even if she doesn't own a house, who's going to pay her bills if she's incapacitated? What's going to happen? What if she has children? What's going to happen to those children if she passes away? Having assets, significant assets, rings a bell that you should be dealing with this, but the bells should really start ringing much sooner.
Now, a lot of people out there, we are painfully aware of, do not have estate plans in place and have definitely not done it when they were 18. So, say I go out tomorrow and I am hit by a bus and I pass on without an estate plan or even a will. That's called intestate, isn't it?
Yeah, that's called dying intestate. And there are laws, different laws in different states about what's called intestate succession, which means who inherits what legally. It's often very specific, um, depending on next of kin. But the bottom line is everyone's going to court. It's called probate. And it's a process that is required in most states. Okay, so if you don't have a will, probate for sure. If you do have a will, probably everyone's still going to have to go to probate, depending on the state. Here in California, probate typically takes, as last I checked, about 16 months.
Wow.
That means your loved ones are going to have multiple court dates and have to probably hire lawyers and spend 16 months or more, depending on the situation. And, different by state, getting your estate settled, possibly and likely arguing over how to settle it. And very importantly, in most situations, they won't be able to touch your assets while it's being settled. The money that's in your bank account that could be used to bury you or help them, they won't be able to touch it if it's going to probate. Um, Now, I'm oversimplifying. There are certain situations that they can touch some of the money, depending on how you filled out those payable on death forms and so on. When you opened your accounts, it's very complicated. But yes, there will be a court involved if very likely if you don't have a will, and even if you have a will, if you don't have a living trust. Not going to go into all those details right now, but the bottom line is you're causing a big problem if you don't deal with this.
Absolutely. And when you're talking about causing a problem, you're talking about your heirs and connected family that you leave behind when you pass. One thing that comes up a lot is the question of, does an estate plan matter at all while you're still alive, before you pass?
It absolutely can. Now, it matters. An estate plan can include certain kinds of trusts, often irrevocable trusts, which can protect assets while you're alive from certain situations like bankruptcy and animosity from ex-spouses and so on. These tend to matter more when you are wealthy, and there can be certain tax advantages to certain structures that are created by an estate planning lawyer. Often those include what's called tax planning or advanced tax planning, which is very different from tax preparation. I don't want to get into all the details, but let's just say yes, it can matter a great deal if you are alive. The most common and important situation is incapacity. What I talked about with the young person getting hit by a car uh, is real. And the most common situation where this matters when you're alive is when you are disabled and cannot handle your own affairs. It's very likely that that will happen to you when you are aged. Something like 80% of people face incapacity at some point as they age, meaning they can no longer handle their own finances and need to designate someone else. That designation takes place through estate planning, through powers of attorney, and so on. But again, young people, it matters a lot. And it matters a lot to anyone with children.
Right.
If you have minor children, they are by definition incapable of handling their own finances. And if something happened to you, uh, who would be in charge of their finances? Who would be in charge of them? that's something you want to plan for very carefully and not let a court decide randomly.
And in terms of letting people decide things, you mentioned an irrevocable trust. Isn't it the case that most times a trust is revocable while you're alive and then becomes irrevocable upon your death?
Yes, the most common estate planning tool is the living trust, which is a revocable, or you can pronounce it revocable, some people do,
Hmm.
a revocable trust, which means you can change it during your lifetime, but it cannot be changed after you die, except under certain circumstances. Again, complex and often very important. Again, one reason you need an attorney to deal with this and not a computer. Um, for example, there are things called trust protectors, which are people who can change a trust after you die, which may be a crucial thing to happen for your family. Um, I could explain circumstances around that. But it all goes back to complex situations which you cannot fully anticipate or understand without the advice of an attorney. And it's why you need an attorney to help you figure out your own complex situations. Do I need an irrevocable trust in addition to my living trust? It might be very important if you own a business. It might be very important if you're divorced or if you're expecting a divorce for yourself or your children, to have some kind of specialized trust in place. Again, what specific specialized trust? Got to talk to a lawyer.
All right. Well, you kind of brought up something that I wanted to circle back to. So I'm sitting here going, okay, Mark has just laid out a bunch of reasons why I need to get my estate planned. I need to get a will. I need to get trusts. I need to get this stuff in order, even though I'm not a Rockefeller. And because I'm not a Rockefeller, I need a budget way to get this done. So I'm thinking I go to one of these AI based things that I can just fill it out. And I know Mark just said, don't do that, but hey, I'm not made of money. And I just heard a podcast ad where I could get my will done for $159 on one of these sites. That sounds more my speed. Mark, why am I wrong?
There's lots of reasons why you should spend real money on this. A lawyer, if you don't have a complex situation, it might cost you $3,000. It might cost you less than that. That's a lot more than doing it online with some kind of package like that. But let me explain why it's important. First of all, you don't know the right questions to ask yourself. So a good lawyer is going to sit down with you and say, are there properties that you own that are not currently in you and your spouse's name? Is there someone from the shadows of your past, like an ex-spouse that you married 30 years ago and forgot all about? You were married for 2 days, who could emerge from the shadows when you die to try to claim part of your estate? Let's figure out how to deal with that. Do you have IRAs, IRA accounts, and other complex, even more complex retirement accounts need to be handled in special ways. So, an online document is going to say, do you want to include your IRA in your living trust? And you go, yeah, okay. You click on that. Well, actually, in most circumstances, you should not include your IRA in your living trust. It depends. In certain circumstances, specialized trusts are created just for IRAs so that the tax consequences are handled. You don't know these issues, and the computer is not going to tease them out of you properly. The conversation with the lawyer is just as important. It's more important than the writing up of the documents, right? The lawyer is going to probe. They're going to ask embarrassing, difficult questions. Those questions need to be brought to light.
So is that the reason why the lawyer that you would get through these online services, because they provide a lawyer, a lot of them, to talk to you, but these online trust mills, as we're calling them, is that the reason why, that's not good enough? Because the lawyer's not going to delve deeply?
This is a very important question because these services, for a price, it might cost $600 to get your will and trust done. They often provide access to a lawyer for questions, and I've been through this experience myself. a very reputable company. I did have questions. I got to talk to a lawyer for 15, 20 minutes to answer my question. And they were young lawyers who pretty much knew what they were doing. They weren't highly experienced lawyers, but okay. But the point is, I had to know what questions to ask. I had to say, should I, uh, uh, include part of my business in this living trust, or should I not? Right? And they were helpful answering those questions, but they didn't probe. That's not their job. They're just there like FAQ answering questions. Right? It's not good enough. It's not good enough. It's not taking a look at your entire situation and saying, what's the best way to plan your estate? One size does not fit all. And that's what these services are trying to do.
All right, but Mark, like I said, I'm the kind of guy Bruce Springsteen writes songs about. I don't have a lot of money. I don't even own a house, hypothetically. Uh, as somebody who is listening to this and going, oh, well, I just walked in off the street. I don't have a lot of assets. I don't really have much to my name at all. Why would I even bother? I only have a few things. Why would I bother with this much complexity?
All right. So let me explain why people who are not rich need serious estate planning, because that's like the big question that many people have, and that's the perfect question to ask, Chuck. So if I have $5 million, right, how important is that money to the next generation? It's a very interesting question. It's a lot of money, right? Obviously, I need to do planning in my own lifetime, tax planning that might include complex trusts, and I need to plan for the next generation. Seems obvious. However, the chance, if I'm in a family that has $5 million in assets, the chance that that money is going to be highly significant to the next generation is less than someone without a lot of assets. Because the chance that my kids have significant assets of their own by the time they're 60, 70, whatever time I'm going to pass away, is very high. So it's certainly important that I plan it, but it may not be the most important thing in those people's lives. Now, if I have $200,000 or $100,000 in assets, it's quite possible that I am in a family where that money might make an enormous difference to the next generation. It might be the difference between them being able to make a down payment or buy a car or something that would change their lives. So yeah, it has to be planned well. The other most equally important thing is preventing arguments. If there's a reason that estate plans are 60, 70 pages long and highly detailed, it's because they're preventing arguments in the future. Now, suppose in my family, for example, there's something of great sentimental value, but not high asset value. An oil painting that was done by my father years ago that everyone loves and everyone wants and is sitting over my fireplace. And I have, 3 children. Are they going to fight over that oil painting? Maybe. Unless I state in very specifically in my will, this is what's going to happen to that painting, right? Preventing those kinds of arguments is an incredibly important reason to do this right. And an incredibly important reason to have a lawyer sit down and talk through, well, are there things in your life that are of sentimental value that might cause arguments later on? Now, having someone sit with you and ask that question is a whole lot different than filling out a form online. I'm telling you. And the skillful lawyer who knows how to ask the right questions is going to anticipate the potential future arguments and make sure everything is dealt with and settled in your will and trust so that your loved ones don't end up fighting over it and breaking up the family in the future.
This is very, very interesting and really important stuff to talk about. So the point you're making over and over again in different ways is how important your lawyer is to the estate plan that you're going to make.
Mhm.
So, what should I look for in a lawyer? Do I need a lawyer who specializes in a particular kind of estate planning? Or is it more important to look for a lawyer who is in my local area and knows the local issues in my state? If somebody is wealthy versus not so much, do they need a lawyer who has specific experience in advanced tax planning? Or if they own a business, do I need to focus on finding an estate planning lawyer who's focused on business succession? If I have a complex family situation, do I need a family lawyer? Do I need multiple lawyers in order to work this out? So what should I really be looking for in my estate planning lawyer?
Well, all those things you brought up are crucial and go to the point that, one size doesn't fit all in terms of wills and trusts, and one lawyer doesn't fit all. You really do need to find someone who's dealt with your particular kinds of issues before. But let's start with this specialization thing. There are lots of general purpose lawyers who do all kinds of things and kind of do estate planning on the side. It's very common for estate planning to be kind of a side thing that they take care of when they take care of other issues in your life. Unfortunately, those lawyers often are not up to date on all the crucial issues in estate planning. And by the way, estate planning law is something that changes far more frequently than many other areas of law. It's crazy, but it's very political, right? The way capital gains are taxed changes all the time. The way that property taxes are controlled when someone dies changes all the time. The state taxes and what's called death taxes vary greatly state by state and change all the time thanks to legislatures turning over and so on. So you need somebody who's really up on it. Now, often you said local. You must have someone in your state who understands the laws in your state. That's number one. Uh, there are often small town lawyers who do all kinds of things, including estate planning. They may not be the right person to help you with the bigger picture, especially if you're wealthy. You may want to find these days it doesn't matter so much meeting someone face to face in person. You may be able to find someone more remotely who does specialize. Absolutely, if you own a business, if you have a complex blended family, you need someone who's dealt with those kinds of things before. And Yes, specific experience in what we call advanced tax planning. Complex tax planning for people with significant assets is often an important part of estate planning and matters a lot when you're alive as well. So yes, picking the lawyer means picking someone specialized.
All right. Well, I'm picking someone specialized. I'm going out there. I'm looking. I get on the Google and I see that there are 10 different estate planning lawyers in my city. What are some red flags that I should look out for when I'm approaching a estate planning lawyer that would be a sign that I should not work with them?
Well, number one is, they're not dabbling in this as a sideline. We already talked about that. But the other big red flag is if they ask you just a very few questions and they go, okay, no problem, I'll get this written up for you next week. A lawyer needs to ask you a lot of questions. If they're not asking you a lot of questions, they're not doing their job. If they're not prying open all the little corners of your life and finding out all your assets, people go to lawyers, they don't realize they need to tell them everything. It's very common. Perhaps you have a child that you're estranged from and you don't intend to leave them any assets. That's perfectly well your right. But it's not so simple to do that in many states. You can't just leave their name out of your will or leave their name out when you're talking to your lawyer. I'm not talking to that kid. Forget it. In many states, including here in California, it's very important to specifically say not only that you're leaving them out of your will, but why. And that better be a good reason. In many states, if your reason is that they married someone outside of their religion, etc., a judge may overturn your will. if it's challenged. So you've got to discuss these things with a lawyer. You've got to bring out all the shadows, and you need someone who's going to ask you the questions that you aren't going to think of yourself. So red flag, lawyer doesn't ask a lot of questions. They go, yeah, you have a very simple situation. It's not going to cost you much money. They're going to go fill out a form on their computer and pump you out a will and trust, and great, but not great 30 years from now.
So, depending on the complexity of my situation, I assume the cost is going to vary. But should the lawyer charge me by the hour, or should I expect a fixed fee kind of a situation?
So this depends. There's no hard and fast rule around that. Some lawyers will charge you a fixed fee. Some will demand to be paid hourly. Obviously, in general, you should be tending toward a lawyer who will charge you a fixed fee. Often they need to understand your situation, how complex it is up front before they quote a fixed fee, and that's perfectly reasonable. If you have a blended family, previous marriage, 3 kids from a previous marriage, and so on, you're going to have a complex situation. It's going to cost more for them to figure it out and write it up properly. It's if you can get a fixed fee, that's great. Some lawyers demand to be paid hourly. It may be worth it, particularly if you have a very complex situation with a lot of assets, you're wealthy, that may be the only arrangement that's going to work. So there's no hard and fast rule. In general, most of us would like a fixed fee quoted up front.
Once we get the lawyer picked, we're sitting down, we're talking to the lawyer. What are some of the most common mistakes people make when they're sitting down with a lawyer and setting up their estate plan?
So I would say the number one mistake is just not telling them everything. People, if there's one person in your life besides your spouse you need to trust absolutely, it's your lawyer. You really have to tell them all the facts about your life. You have to give them a complete accounting of your assets. It's painful to do that. In America, we're particularly reluctant to tell people about our assets, even lawyers. But the number one mistake people make is not telling them everything. And I'd say, the number two mistake is trying to do their work for them, assuming you know better than them. You don't. Listen to what they're saying. And a third, I'd say, is not coming prepared with lists of everything you got, because it's going to end up costing you a lot more if you don't have a complete list when you show up at the door.
You just mentioned preparation, and I'm very interested to hear what would somebody need to do to prepare to see a lawyer, to use that time well.
So some lawyers will give you a checkoff list of things that you need to get together before you see them. If they provide you with that, or if you download something like that, follow it and do it. Come prepared with, a list of everyone who may be involved in your estate, even if you're excluding them. That means names, addresses, everything that that crucial information about them. Come with a list of your bank accounts, your properties, that property in Hawaii that you invested in years ago and you forgot about, the stock certificates. Some people own individual stocks with certificates, those can be kind of a hassle. Get it all together and follow a checkoff list so you don't forget stuff. Come prepared. Come prepared. It will save enormous time and it will prevent mistakes.
List of people, list of stuff.
Yep.
Well, Mark, we could talk about this all day, but I know that you are a very busy guy and you got a lot to get to. Again, thank you so much for joining us and sitting down and talking with us today. We just wanted to sit down and talk with you and get to know you a little bit and have you explain some of your knowledge when it comes to estate planning. So thank you so much for joining us today, Mark.
Thank you, Chuck.
And thank you for making it to the end of our episode. We really appreciate you sticking around and checking us out.
And we look forward to talking about the ins and outs of estate planning with all of you lots more.
We'll see you next time. Take care.
Thanks for listening to Essential Estate Experts, presented by Screenfire Media. Please remember to like, subscribe, ring the bell on YouTube, and rate us 5 stars on your favorite podcast app. It really helps. For more information, please visit screenfiremedia.com. Essential Estate Experts is copyright 2023 Screenfire Media, all